and welcome to this video. You may or may not know that I had seen 6 doctors and a naturopath by the time I stumbled across the Optimum Health Clinic, and I've since been a patient of theirs for about a year and a half. I've seen both their psychology and nutrition department, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my experiences with them. And just before I start, I just want to point out that this is a completely independent review and I am not being paid to make this video. The Optimum Health Clinic was founded in 2004 by Alex Howard, and it specialises in fatigue conditions such as ME, CFS and fibromyalgia. With patients in over 50 countries, it's recognised for its innovative approach of systematically researching and testing different approaches and integrating them together in the most effective way. With many of the team having their own personal experiences with CFS, ME, this clinic is also well known for its caring and empathetic approach. The Optimum Health Clinic also has a strong commitment to research and growing the evidence base behind its approach. In 2012, a landmark study was published in the British Medical Journal Open, which demonstrated statistically significant improvement with the OHC approach, and the randomised controlled trial was recently granted NHS ethics approval. So it's quite funny how I came across the Optimum Health Clinic. Well, I can laugh now, I wasn't laughing at the time, but after almost a year of having health issues, and it was becoming pretty obvious that this was looking like chronic fatigue that I was suffering with, I spent a good bit of time looking online for different chronic fatigue clinics, and I kept coming across ones that would just say, "We teach you how to manage your symptoms." I just didn't like the sound of it. One time I was reading, a place said that you just had to learn to live with this illness, and like that got me so angry I literally threw my phone across the room. I basically went in a huff after reading that, and I didn't want to read anything else about chronic fatigue or look at any other clinics, and I just didn't even want to think or talk about it. And one night my mum phoned me up and she said, "Ash, I found a good sounding clinic." Nope, I don't want to hear anything about it. Sick of hearing about this, and I don't want to hear about any other clinics because it's just going to be the usual shite of that we're going to teach you how to manage your symptoms, and that's not what I want. So yeah, I feel a bit bad. I was hard to deal with at that time, to say the least. So I pretty much didn't let my mum explain the clinic she had found. So a few days had passed, and after I'd cooled off a bit, I started researching again, and this is when I discovered the OHC's YouTube channel. This was the first place that I found where people were talking about recovery being possible and also sharing recovery stories. The first recovery story I listened to, I listened to it twice. I think I've listened to it 3 times now, and the first time I just bawled my eyes out. It was the first time I had heard a story where it was basically my story, and I just got so emotional because I was like, oh my goodness, this is what I'm dealing with. And what was even better was that this guy had recovered through the clinic, and not only recovered, he went on to run marathons. So this was super exciting for me. So I investigated more on their YouTube channel, and I basically became addicted to it. In those early days, this was such a lifeline for me because all I needed to hear was that some people had got better, and there was so many recovery stories on this YouTube channel, and every single one had something that I related to, and it was almost like an epiphany was happening every time I would watch a video on their YouTube channel. So basically the seeds of hope were planted. I knew that recovery was possible, and this clinic seemed to know what they're talking about. Something I really liked about the OHC was that they didn't claim to have all the answers, and they were really honest in their approach and how it had to be multifactorial and it's different for each person. But because of their, like, I think over 15 years experience in treating thousands of people, they had extensive experience in treating these illnesses. And like I said, most of the staff have had their personal experiences with chronic fatigue syndrome themselves. So I could also tell that they were super passionate about researching this illness. So that's something I really liked about them. I went on to read Alex Howard's first book, which I highly recommend. It's about his 7-year journey with chronic fatigue syndrome and how he went about setting up the Optimum Health Clinic. And he talks a lot about how the place works in that book. And it is super inspiring. I highly recommend that you read it. So I was sold. As far as I was convinced, this place was gonna help me. So I phoned up my mum and said, "Mum, I think I found the place that's gonna help me." And she just said, "Is it the Optimum Health Clinic by any chance?" I was trying to tell you about them weeks ago. So as always, mums know best. Do not doubt your mum when it comes to these things. And so I made contact with the Optimum Health Clinic. I had gotten to the stage of seeing so many doctors and having had so many tests done that I wrote up a full-on PDF explaining my timeline of decline, my main symptoms, and where I was at that time. Basically just to sit having to go through the agony of having to explain this long story to yet another health professional. Like, that is extremely draining. And I also compiled a color-coded spreadsheet. It sounds so nerdy. With all my test results over the year, just so the OHC could just glance at it and, you know what's already been ruled out. And I also made a food diary spreadsheet. I actually have it here, I can show you. So it was a pretty extensive, oh my goodness, I did not realize it's 11 pages long. That's pretty crazy. I haven't looked at this in a long time. But basically, it just explains, well, it starts off saying, "Hello OHC. I would usually introduce myself to health professionals by apologising for bombarding them with my incredibly long saga of health events, but I feel you're no stranger to this." Basically, it just explained everything that I'd been through and kind of the stages of my CFS and kind of a bit of a timeline, blah blah blah, it goes on and on and on. The fact that they even took the time to read this just says a lot about them. I feel like this is bonkers. I just, that is massive. And then, like, this, I don't even think this is all of it, but that is basically like all the blood tests I had done. You can see there's just pages of it, but like, it's just crazy. In a way, it felt like this was the most important job I was applying to in my life. And in a way, it was. Because when I chose to leave Australia and return home to start my journey with the Optimum Health Clinic, I decided that recovery was going to become my full-time job. And it basically did for the next 13 months or so. So when I got home, I had my 15-minute free call with the clinic, which was super useful. And my first impressions of them was pretty much 10 out of 10. My mum had already contacted them before when I was in a huff, and they posted out a great information pack, and it came with a DVD with some patient recovery stories, which again, I cried watching. It was very good. And in the 15-minute call, they answered some of my questions. They were super friendly, and I decided there and then I'm going to sign up for the Optimum Health Clinic's flagship program, the 90-day program. So the 90-day program is a neuro-linguistic programming course and emotional freedom technique based intervention that includes 5 days of live workshops on Zoom in a small group, one group conference call at the end of the 90 days, and a total of 75 minutes of one-to-one practitioner time after the workshop. We also received downloads of meditations and sleep CDs and got access to a website called Secrets to Recovery, which is full of useful resources and tips. Also, before starting the course, they sent us out this booklet which had pretty much everything we were going to be learning on the course, along with letters of how to get the most out of it. So that was super useful because, like, you know, I didn't want to spend all this money for all this information to go in, and then, like, I'm super forgetful, so I would just forget it all. So it was helpful to have this to refer to after the course. It felt like Christmas Day, waking up on the first day of the 90-day program. I was literally like a kid on their first day of school. I had my manual out, little pad and paper, everything set up and ready for attendance. Because of COVID, the workshops were all held by Zoom, which actually worked out really handy because I live in Northern Ireland and the clinic is in London. So that was super handy. And I knew that I was going to be joined by 4 other people. At first, I was full of so many weird mixed emotions because I was aware that, you know, I'd heard stories of people with chronic fatigue syndrome that were wheelchair bound, bed bound, and I was a bit worried that I would be in this group with other people and they would think I'm silly for joining, and maybe my issues seemed minuscule in comparison. But I just kept reminding myself that even though I wasn't bedbound, my quality of life was extremely challenging and I did deserve to be on this course. So I was super nervous before the first call, but as soon as we were all in that Zoom call, everyone introduced themselves, I knew that this was the right decision. We all had pretty similar experiences, and it was the first time that I was talking to actual people who truly understood the struggles I had been through, and most importantly, they had the same goals and determination to work through this together. The main psychologist on the course actually had recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome herself, and having been through seeing so many horrible doctors who just didn't understand, having a psychologist that's been there herself really made a big difference for me. And she was also assisted by another practitioner whose wife had chronic fatigue syndrome and had recovered through the clinic, so his input was invaluable as well. It's hard to sum up everything that we learned on the course, obviously, in this short video, but we learned a lot. Topics such as learning our chronic fatigue syndrome subtypes, the stages to recovery, managing stress, and learning some brain retraining techniques, and EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. Basically a lot of tools to assist us in our recovery. But for me, one of the most valuable things about doing this course in a group was that it became like a little support group. And we even created a WhatsApp group after the course finished, and for a while we even had monthly Zoom calls, and even to this day we still exchange the old message to each other, which has been really lovely because we all had a similar mindset of recovery is possible, and just being able to talk to people that understand, that just meant so much to me, because you've got your family and you've got your friends, but you know, they just, unless you've been through it, you won't understand what this is like. And I think that's what really sets this course apart from other courses that you can do online. But of course it's not everyone's cup of tea. I know a lot of people don't like doing group stuff, But for me, that was a big bonus. So when the workshops ended after the first week, it completely opened my mind to the weird and wacky things that we were going to be doing on it. Like, you just have to search on Google tapping or EFT and you'll see what I mean, but you know, pretty weird. I think accepting the weirdness is an essential part of the success in the program. It definitely takes a certain amount of desperation to try these things, if I'm completely honest. So I rarely explain what I do to other people that don't understand, because they'll often, you know, well, they're not literally rolling their eyes at me, but you just can feel that, and the word placebo gets mentioned a lot, and you know, unless you're in the position where you're sort of so desperate that you have to just try anything, you're not going to really understand it. So over those following 90 days, I practiced the techniques pretty religiously. We were told on the first day of the course a story of, I might say it's completely wrong, but apparently the rocket to the moon was like 98% of the time off course, and it was only through many series of readjustments that it successfully made it to the moon. And that is pretty much how you can expect recovery to go. It's definitely not linear, and it's a series of going off course and coming back on. That's what makes it work. And that's exactly how it was for me. Some days I didn't have any improvement, some days I did. And while overall the course, I would say, was very good, it was valuable to me and I would recommend it, at the end of it, I just knew that something just still wasn't right. A lot of people do recover purely through these sort of courses and brain retraining techniques, but I felt like my mindset was in a pretty good place, and I just still wasn't making the shifts I had hoped for. So a couple of months into the 90-day plan, I made contact with the nutrition side of the Optimum Health Clinic. I feel like the name nutrition department doesn't really do them justice. It's so much more than nutrition. To me, it feels more like a functional medicine approach. And actually for me, I haven't even changed my diet that much since being on it. My diet was pretty spot on anyway, but I have done a lot of work in other aspects of the nutrition department, which I'll come to. The OHC nutrition team specialises in optimising and energising various bodily systems by using primarily food and dietary supplements to correct imbalances. They also use various functional tests, including blood, urine, stool, and saliva analysis. I'm going to explain how their nutrition department works from my perspective as a patient. First of all, I was assigned a practitioner and I completed a pretty extensive questionnaire before my initial consultation. This consultation lasted, I think it was around an hour, and it involved discussing my case history, talking about symptoms, and discussing a little bit of a roadmap, and talking about some functional testing I was going to do between then and the next consultation to get more answers. The OHC can arrange many comprehensive functional tests. For me, my history and symptoms pointed to immune issues, potentially infections. So the first two tests I took was a comprehensive stool analysis and the CD3 CD57, I hope I've said that right, test, which can detect potential active infections and suppress the immune system. The stool analysis test was pretty fascinating, to be honest. It uses cutting-edge technology and biomarkers and offers valuable insight into digestive function, intestinal inflammation, and intestinal microbiome, and can also detect parasites. The results of this test was 18 pages long. And I don't understand most of it, to be completely honest, but 18 pages of information from my poo, like, that's pretty extensive. So you can see on the first page here, I was in need of some serious help in some areas. My practitioner explained that of potential bacteria in the gut, they range from 1 being good and 5 being bad, and most of mine were 5 out of 5. Indicating that I needed some serious interventions. I also discovered I had a pretty common parasite. I've heard of apparently 50% of people have this parasite, and generally it doesn't cause symptoms, but in my case of having so many fires going on in my body, it was just a further drain to the immune system. The test also revealed that I wasn't absorbing protein properly, so all this was taken into consideration when recommending my supplements. The CD3 CD57 test came back with pretty low absolute levels of CD57 in natural killer cells. Apparently this should be somewhere between 100 and 360, but mine was only 30, which was indicating chronic immune suppression, potentially by Borrelia, which is indicative of Lyme's disease. So following these results, I had another consultation where I was sent a supplement plan to address these issues and was recommended to take a further co-infections test just to get an idea of what was causing the immune suppression and low NK cells. This test tested for Borrelia, Ehrlichia, and Anaplasma and Babesia. Not sure if they're pronounced correctly, but you get what I mean. All of them came back positive. So as my practitioner had suspected, my system was overloaded with infections, not to mention the mosquito Ross River virus I picked up that was basically the catalyst for all this. And considering like 80% or so of the immune system lives in the gut, I had some serious issues there, plus autoimmune thyroid condition that had surfaced, and it was no wonder my immune system went offline, to be completely honest. So it was great just to have some confirmation that I wasn't going crazy, that there was stuff that was going on, and if there's stuff going on, then there's stuff you can do about it. So that was really comforting. So I continued to have monthly consultations where we discussed symptom changes, how I was getting on with the supplements. For the first few months, we focused mainly on gut health until I was strong enough to manage the antimicrobial protocols. I'm not gonna lie, these were flipping brutal. At times, I felt so much worse. Sometimes I had terrible detox reactions. One time I even had to completely change all the supplements because it was so hard. It was really difficult. There was times that I nearly give up. I just felt like I was spending all my money to get worse. But slowly and surely, I reckon 10 months maybe into these protocols, while doing all the mind work from the 90-day plan and many other things that I was working on myself, I started seeing remarkable improvements. I had gone from finding it extremely difficult to leave the house, having to stop work for a whole year, to now being back to working full time and going to the gym multiple times a week. And I've recently started trying running and climbing again, and while I'm not 100% there yet, it's definitely going the right direction. Here is the tricky part. The sad reality is, it is extremely expensive to go through a specialized clinic like this, and it actually breaks my heart. Overall, the amount of money I spent on my recovery, and this includes everything I spent before the Optimum Health Clinic, has been just under £10,000. Sometimes I find that really, really depressing, but I have zero regrets because there was no other option. I have seen 8 doctors now in total, and the NHS has offered me nothing, absolutely nothing. As far as I'm concerned, I was ready to part with every single penny I had in the quest to make a recovery, because what is the point in even having money if you don't even have a life to enjoy it? It's just pointless. So I was really lucky to be in a position that I did have savings. Even though it's not what I wanted to spend my money on, I knew it was going to be worth it. So the price for everything I've done with the Optimum Health Clinic so far has been, the 90-day program cost £625, and an extra one-to-one session cost £125 per hour. I only did one extra session, and the psychologist, knowing my main issues were not psychology related as such, suggested that I may get more out of seeing a local therapist to deal with coping strategies rather than specialist help. I really appreciated this honesty, and it never felt like they were just trying to make money out of me. It was the same when it came to nutrition actually. When I was trying to get into the nutrition department, they were bursting to the seams with COVID patients, and they suggested that I look at the British Association of Nutritional Therapists, as they apparently have the same sort of training as the Optimum Health Clinic. So basically, they were happy to send me elsewhere, just as long as I was able to get help. And I really appreciated that so much. And if anything, that made me want to see them more. So I did decide to hold out so I could see a nutritional therapist with them. So for nutrition, the initial consultation cost £260, and each follow-up has been £150 per, I think it's 45 minutes or an hour. The cost of supplements varies vastly. My practitioner explained to me that she can be sensitive to budgets, and it can be as little as £100 a month, but she explains that the protocols might just take a bit longer. I made it clear from day one that I was so desperate, I just wanted to go full steam ahead. So I can often be spending £300 a month on supplements plus the consultation fees. But it is important to point out that I said I just wanted everything. I basically was like, I'm so desperate, just help me, I don't care what it costs. The total cost of the tests so far has cost me around £500. But again, these were optional for me. I wanted to get a bigger picture and I wanted to do more testing. So to date, after 1.5 years with the Optimum Health Clinic, taking into consideration the 90-day plan, plus one extra psychology session and all the nutrition consultations, testing and supplements, not holding back on any costs from myself, I have paid around £6,500. This sounds flipping mental, I know it does. It's hard to even comprehend that sort of money sometimes, but if you are concerned about the cost of this, I would recommend phoning them and just seeing what sort of budgets they can tailor to. I'm not sure because like I said, I just was like, I want to go full steam ahead here. I'm going to use all my life savings because, you know, this is so important. Yeah, I'm not sure what they can tailor to. Another thing I really liked about this clinic was it didn't feel like they were trying to make money out of me. It can be really hard to trust companies sometimes. I have seen a company that promised me everything and I wasted a lot of money with them, so I also find it really difficult to trust places. And I also want to point out that before the Optimum Health Clinic, I spent around £3,500 on other random protocols, things that I was doing myself, things that didn't really work out. So it's possible that even though it seems expensive, that by going through a clinic that knows what they're talking about, maybe it'll save money in the long run. I don't know. It's just something to think about. So the pros and cons of the Optimum Health Clinic. The pros. Many people at the clinic have had personal experiences with chronic fatigue syndrome and so are passionate about helping others. They have over 15 years experience researching and treating fatigue conditions and have treated thousands of patients, so they've got a wealth of knowledge. It can be done 100% remotely. That's how I've been doing it. The 90-day plan is done in little groups, which provides a support network of like-minded people. The nutrition department creates tailored plans specific to you. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Comprehensive tests to paint a clearer picture rather than just guessing what supplements you need. Plenty of resources to accompany their treatment plans on secrets to recovery, like meditation tracks and seminars. They are super organized. They're passionate about the research they do, and it actually works. This does help people. And the cons, pretty much the biggest con is the price, and that's sadly the way it is. It is expensive. And another con, it's not really a con, but you do still have to put in a lot of hard work yourself to make it work. So the main takeaway from this video, overall, my experience with the Optimum Health Clinic has been a positive one. From day one, they've been extremely organised and super supportive, and this is helped by the fact that many of the practitioners have suffered with the illness themselves. My nutrition practitioner, who I'm still seeing to this day, has been incredibly supportive on this journey. There's been times that I've emailed her in a total flap being like, oh, this supplement isn't working, or I think it's making me feel worse, and or maybe I don't know how to take a supplement, and she's always responded really quickly with helpful advice. And there's even times that I send her an email just with a photo of something really cool that I've done that I'm really proud of, and it always feels like she's really happy to see them. And just recently I emailed my practitioner to tell her of a crazy plan I have to hike the Ireland Way in July and being off all supplements by then. And I wondered if the response would be, oh, you need to, be careful, you don't overdo it and crash. And actually, I received the most lovely email, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but it really does demonstrate what sort of people they have working at this clinic. She responded with this email saying, I don't think it's crazy to plan to walk the Ireland Way, Ash. I think it's a fantastic goal to set. All the goals you have set in the last 12 months, you've achieved, and it's such an important part of recovery to have goals like this. I'm fully behind you and your aim to be off most supplements by July. And this is what you can expect from anyone at the clinic, I feel. I've spoken to a few people there and they've all been really lovely and supportive. However, it is important for me to say, if you have a fatigue-related illness, it is unlikely that any clinic is going to make you better. You are going to make you better. At the end of the day, you're the one that has to put in the hard work, using the tools and working on everything else, and it is bloody hard work. But arming yourself with specialised support is going to give you the best possible chance of recovery, I believe. And lastly, I know money is a big issue. Sadly, chronic illnesses like this can rob us of our lives and our incomes. Lots of people can't work, for example, so understandably, I imagine the prices of these clinics would put people off, and it's infuriating that we do have to spend this amount of money to get better, but sadly that is the hard truth of this illness. And this is the reason why I document everything I spend, to make a point. And I'm going to go off on a bit of a rant now, but you know, you get to the point where you get so ill that you can't work, so you can't make money. Then you go to the doctors and they're telling you there's nothing wrong with you, or that there's nothing we can do. And then the only help that's around the corner that might actually work, it costs a fortune. So you just get stuck on this cycle, and it's, oh, that's a rant for another video. But that is the sad truth of it. It is expensive. But I will say, if it is a case that you can't afford it, I recommend reading both Alex's book. I'm reading his new one at the minute, and there's just a wealth of information in them. And I also recommend checking out the Optimum Health Clinic's YouTube channel, as well as Alex Howard's channel. Both are brilliant resources for recovering from a fatigue-related illness. And perhaps you could give the clinic a call and just talk over budgets with them and see what they can do. So I think that's pretty much everything I want to say. This was probably maybe my longest video yet. I don't know. I didn't realize I had so much to say there. But yeah, I hope that was useful. For me, before I went with the clinic, I tried to find independent reviews of them. So that's why I wanted to make one for other people. So if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like or subscribe. There's going to be lots more videos coming like it. And I do read all the comments as well. So if there's anything you want to say about this video or any other videos that you'd be interested for me to make, then let me know. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.